Right now, we'd like to go back to Governor Davis, who will give his insight into what happened today, joining a chorus of politicians commenting on this terrorist attack.
I want to thank everyone for coming here this afternoon. I have with me, as you know, Spike Helmick, who is the head of the Highway Patrol, the Lieutenant Governor, Sheriff Blanes, who is the sheriff in the county in which we reside, and Mr. Guerin, who is the head of who represents the Office of Emergency Services and participates in our terrorism task force, which has had 2 meetings by phone today already. I want to just brief people on the steps we are taking to keep people safe in California and protect their property. First of all emergency services operations are up and running throughout California. Secondly, all law enforcement and firefighting personnel at the state level are fully deployed. Thirdly, we've taken measures to protect vital assets on the ground and in the air in California, including the electrical grid, the state water project, and a number of our bridges. Next, the Department of Health Services has been in touch with the Red Cross, LAX, and San Francisco Airport to prepare to offer assistance to the relatives of victims on the 3 or 4 flights that were headed to Los Angeles. Next, I had a fairly lengthy conversation with all the regional aid coordinators, which consist of 9 sheriffs, the sheriffs of Alameda, Los Angeles, Orange, Sacramento, San Bernardino, San Diego, Santa Barbara, Shasta, and Stanislaus counties, to coordinate efforts around the state to protect important properties, particularly those properties that are on the FBI's target list, to ensure that there are resources to protect them and to minimize any potential threat. I have, as you know, lowered the state flag, and I want to urge all Californians to be calm, if they can, to spend this day with their family, and above all else, to say a prayer for the many victims of this dastardly act committed in New York and Washington. This may well prove to be the largest terrorist act ever on American soil. As you know, 3 and maybe 4 of the planes were headed to California, and presumably include some California passengers. Our hearts and prayers go out to all the victims, no matter where they reside. And I have advised the federal government, and I'm trying to advise Governor Pataki directly, that we are authorizing the release of some urban search and rescue teams. These are highly skilled rescue workers, particularly adept at dealing with structural collapses and the rescue operations entailed therein. We're releasing them to assist people on the East Coast, given the calamity that they've faced. I know they'll appreciate the additional resources that these urban rescue teams provide. These people did remarkable work in the Oklahoma City tragedy. I've talked to the governor of Oklahoma on more than one occasion when he expressed his gratitude to their heroism and dedication, and even flew to California to participate in a ceremony honoring their service. 2 of those 2 delegations of urban search and rescue teams have already taken off. Another one will take off at 4 o'clock to assist our fellow Americans on the East Coast. With that, I'd like Lieutenant Governor to make some remarks in Spanish to share with all of our Spanish brethren some of the comments I just expressed, and then I'd like to call on Sheriff Blanes, who has other commitments, and then the Commissioner of the Highway Patrol, and then we'll answer your questions. Lieutenant Governor.
Thank you, Governor. Quiero asegurar a todos los californianos que estamos tomando todas las medidas necesarias para proteger la seguridad de nuestro pueblo. Todos los centros de emergencia están funcionando. Los equipos de policías y bomberos están en alerta. Estamos tomando medidas de precaución para proteger sistemas vitales como son los otros sistemas, electricidad, sistema de agua y nuestros puentes. Hemos respondido a la petición del gobierno federal para mandar nuestros equipos expertos en búsqueda y rescate para asistir en Nueva York y Washington. Las oficinas de Estado están en contacto con 58 condados. Hemos estado en contacto con todos los alcaldes de nuestras ciudades principales y hemos ofreciendo cualquier asistencia que necesiten. Al igual hemos ofreciendo asistencia a la Casa Blanca y al gobernador Pataki de Nueva York. Nuestro Departamento de Salud está ofreciendo asistencia para las víctimas de las familias de Los Ángeles y San Francisco. Para la información, miembros de la familia pueden comunicarse con American Airlines al 800-245-0999 o con United Airlines al 800-932-8555. He ordenado las banderas del Capitolio sean puestas a media asta. Pido a todos los californianos que mantengan la calma y que oren por las víctimas y sus seres queridos. Que Dios los bendiga.
And now, Sheriff Landis.
Thank you, Governor. First of all, my prayers and thoughts go out to all Americans. This is a tragic day for our country. Today, Governor Davis called upon the sheriffs statewide to make sure that we were all coordinated in our effort to protect the citizens of this great state. We had a conference call with 9 sheriffs to see what each and every one of us were doing on a local basis. We all have operations centers set up. We all are working closely with the federal government. We have teams set up and working out of various FBI headquarters in the different jurisdictions throughout the state. We're also at the airport, Sacramento. I control the airport security-wise. We have that airport closed down, and the other sheriffs are coordinated with their airport directors and commissions. Also coordinate very closely with local chiefs of police here in Sacramento. We have a coordinated effort between the Sacramento Police Department, Sacramento Sheriff's Department, and California Highway Patrol, which is a key element, as you know, with the state. We haven't had any verified threats yet. We're working with all those agencies. I'd just like to thank the governor for his coordinated effort and his program to make sure all citizens in the state are safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Governor. I think it's important to first mention, as Lou did, that we have received threats here in the state of California, but none of them have been verified. We're not aware of any real threat to our people. Certainly this is a time when all of our people need to reflect and to be calm. Clearly the governor has put all of the operational procedures in place that are provided for by him. All of the local law enforcement, as well as state law enforcement and fire and other emergency services, are in place. I think it's important to note again, as the governor did, that the major thoroughfares in this state, specifically the larger buildings, our roadway system, our bridges, all of those things are being closely monitored. And at this point, we're not aware of any concern that our citizens should have. I think it is a time for being calm and reflective. And again, thank the governor for all of his efforts in bringing this to bear. Thank you.
Let me mention one other thing. I want to commend the heroic efforts of firefighters and police officers in New York City who are working against tremendous odds to try and save lives. This is a calamity of unprecedented proportions, and by all accounts, those emergency services personnel did extraordinarily well. You know, I have high regard for our emergency service system in California, and it seems that fire and police officers are all cut from the same cloth. They go above and beyond the call of duty to save lives and protect property. And certainly no one could imagine a catastrophe on this scale, but by all accounts, the rescue efforts in New York were nothing less than heroic. We hope in a small way to provide some additional assistance to the urban search and rescue teams that should be arriving late tonight, early tomorrow morning in New York. One final thing. On the call with the sheriffs, there were repeated concerns about taking precautions to protect any reprisals against Americans. We are one country. We may be of different faiths and come from different nations, but we're all Americans. And we need to let the federal government determine who the culprits are that caused this unspeakable act and let them develop a plan for decisive and coordinated action. We do not want Americans turning on Americans. We do not want reprisals within our borders or within the American borders. So individual sheriffs are meeting with community leaders from various different communities, urging calm, urging discussion, letting people air their concerns and grievances, but doing everything they can to keep it in the discussion stage and prevent any unwanted violence. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
What consideration has been given, if any, to closing schools? And secondly, how long is the Capitol itself able?
If there are no further events today, we intend to have state government fully back in business by tomorrow. All essential functions are being conducted today. As to schools, we think that's a decision best left to local school boards. Many people would say that children cannot be in a safer place than in school, and so individual school districts will make that decision. I believe most of them are keeping the schools open today.
Any idea when the airports might be open?
That's a decision that the FAA will make relative to flights. As I understand it, all air traffic is grounded in this country until further notice. I believe on top of that, LAX closed down, and I believe Sacramento Airport is closed down as well. So first the FAA has to give permission for commercial flights to resume, and then the individual airports governed by local authorities have to decide to go back into operation.
Governor, is there any financial impact, any impact on the state's financial operations in terms of the Wall Street closing? Businesses at the World Trade Center obviously knocked out. Is the state involved in transactions at the time this is all of our
The simple answer is I don't know the answer to your specific question. I would assume that additional resources will be necessary to help local governments and law enforcement protect people and property within their jurisdiction. That subject did come up on the call with the sheriffs, and I said we would make available additional highway patrol officers to assist them in their security efforts, and if it required additional resources, I would go to the legislature to seek them. Beyond that, in terms of financial losses and business transactions, I have to believe there will be some consequences, but it's way too early to determine what they are.
Governor, can you describe the nature of any of those plans?
But I think you were next.
Can you describe the nature of any terrorist threats, unverified, though they may be?
And I would prefer not to. There have been some threats. They have been checked out, and they were determined to be unverified. But clearly, given an emergency of this proportions, the prudent thing to do is to err on the side of caution. That is what we're doing. We did have, for whatever reason, 4 planes headed to California, and we have to do everything we can to protect Californians, to pray for the victims who have already been lost, and to offer comfort to the families who've lost people in this terrible tragedy.
Last question. Any prominent Californians on board any of those planes that you're aware of?
We've asked for the manifold list. We've not yet received them. As soon as they're made available to us, we will release them. The individual airlines may choose to do so before then. I have to believe there were some Californians on those flights because they were headed to Los Angeles and San Francisco. And my heart goes out to everyone who was on those planes, to the families of anyone who lost a victim, no matter where they resided. This is a time for prayer and for coming together as a country.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you.
That, of course, was Governor Gray Davis assuring all Californians that emergency services are in place today, that essential elements of government are operating today. He said that they have taken measures to protect bridges and the state's electrical grid in order to keep the flow of power coming to the households and businesses today.
The governor also said that the state, is willing to offer assistance to those in Southern California, especially in Los Angeles, because as you know, 3 of the 4 flights were headed to Los Angeles to offer any kind of assistance they can to the relatives of the victims who died on those flights as well. Also, he called this a dastardly act. We've heard a number of descriptions of these terrorist attacks today. I believe President Bush called this an act of cowardice, and he said that these whoever's responsible will be hunted down and punished in what way we don't know right now. But it'll be difficult to hunt down whoever did this.
Extremely difficult.
Yeah.
Governor said the state flag has been lowered today, and he also said that even though there have been several threats, they have not been able to verify any of the threats to whatever government buildings or whatever properties here in California. But he said they have received threats, but they were unverifiable.
Also, Lieutenant Governor Cruz Bustamante was just on as well, giving that same message, that is in Spanish, and a representative from the Sheriff's Department throughout the state and also the CHP. The CHP said the roadways and the bridges and the highways are all being closely monitored, and as Alan just mentioned, they also said, you said they received threats here in California, but none have really panned out or none have been verified. And in light of the CHP and updating us on the roads and bridges open, we must tell you that the Golden Gate and Bay Bridges are open at this point in San Francisco. All city-run buildings and schools in San Francisco, though, have been closed. And apparently, Mayor Willie Brown will make an announcement tonight about what city offices in San Francisco and which schools will remain open or closed tomorrow.
And we just got word that another building of the World Trade Center has collapsed there in New York City, and that's just coming in right now.
Because the World Trade Center, it's not just the 2 towers. There's a whole mesh of buildings surrounding it.
Number 7, in fact, yeah.
Right, and the pressure and the fire and the explosion is affecting the buildings surrounding it as well.
And you can see the pictures there as the smoke, the diesel fuel from the aircraft, jet fuel, if you will, still billowing along with all the debris inside those buildings. A huge plume of smoke that will no doubt be covering New York City for several days as this fire continues to burn.
And right now, we'd like to take you back to CNN for more coverage of this breaking news: major terrorist attacks on the East Coast.
Thereafter, at least where building number 7 is concerned, a building that, among other things, housed this emergency response team of the city of New York. At least they had some warning. They had signs that this might happen, and they were able to get as many people away from the area. And the people in the area, of course, are firefighters, EMS personnel, and literally thousands of police officers who have cordoned off the area.
Correct. About 5 minutes ago.
For those of you who have been with us throughout the day, we have shown you a number of times a piece of video, pictures of a plane coming into the building. We have now another piece of video that will show the same thing, different angle. And if we can roll that and take a look now, this again was shortly after the first. Wow. Oh my gosh. I wonder, this comes to us from PAX TV. I wonder, guys, if we can re-cue that in a moment and show that again. You see the fire coming out of the first building there, the plane on the lower left side of your screen. And it looks to me, and I'll confess I don't have the greatest monitor here, that you could almost see the nose of that plane coming through the other side of the building. That may have been an illusion as we looked at it here, but that's how it looked to us. As the flames, these are fully loaded planes, fully loaded with jet fuel. They were headed from the East Coast to the West Coast, so they had an enormous amount of jet fuel. Jeffrey Beatty, a security consultant, said to us a little bit ago, this was low-tech, high-concept. The plane was the bomb, and you just saw the bomb go off. That was around 10 o'clock this morning. That was around 9 o'clock this morning, about 9:08 this morning. Ben Wiedemann, who normally reports for us, we'll get to that. Let's go back to Washington and CNN's Judy Woodruff. Judy?
Aaron, again, pictures that have everyone here riveted. We're told, I don't know whether we have this picture right now available to show our viewers, but I'm told that just a short time ago, driving up Massachusetts Avenue, which is one of the main thoroughfares here in the nation's capital, goes all the way from the Capitol out to northwest Washington, beyond the Naval Observatory where the Vice President lives, and beyond on out into the Maryland suburbs. There was observed a convoy of military vehicles, Humvees, military vehicles, driving up slowly, patrolling, appearing to patrol the area, going out away from the Capitol toward northwest, toward Maryland. Now, perhaps this is just a patrolling effort, but the sight of it has to be something to cause comment, because normally at this hour in Washington you would see an enormous amount of just rush hour traffic, but today is not like any other day. Now to our own senior White House correspondent, John King, who's just about a block and a half from the White House on top of an office building up above the 10th floor there. John?
Judy, a few quick... definitively that when he arrives in Washington, he will address the American people tonight. I am told by sources plans are for an address from the White House. The target time, 9 p.m. That could be moved up a little, but 8 or 9 p.m. we are now told is the target time. But for now, the administration will not confirm that the address will be broadcast from the White House. There have been security concerns throughout the day. We see now on the grounds of the White House, which was evacuated hours ago, some bomb-sniffing dogs and other security personnel securing the area around the White House. But we are told by administration officials the president will be back in Washington shortly and will address the American people tonight. And as we reported a bit earlier, congressional leaders who also, as part of the protocol, the emergency evacuation protocol, were taken to secure locations themselves outside of Washington. The bipartisan congressional leadership also making its way back to Washington, and it will deliver statements, the 4 leaders from the steps of the Capitol tonight as well. All of these designed to offer signs of reassurances to the American people that their government is up and running at this time of great tragedy. I want to add one other bit of information. A lot of lawmakers trying to get briefings from Capitol Hill police, from administration officials, from the CIA and the FBI and others. We are told that in those briefings there has been some speculation, and again the law enforcement officials saying this is just speculation at this moment, that that plane that crashed outside of Pittsburgh may have been heading toward Washington. In those briefings, I'm told by several sources, 3 potential targets were listed. 1, the presidential retreat at Camp David, 2, the White House, and 3, the United States Capitol building. Again, though, lawmakers and other officials being given those briefings told that is speculative, but based on the flight paths and everything else we've seen unfold on this tragic day, that law enforcement officials believe at this moment that the potential targets for that plane, which crashed outside Pittsburgh, were perhaps Camp David, perhaps the White House behind me, or perhaps the United States Capitol. Judy?
John, and we can only imagine the struggle that must have gone on board that aircraft in the cockpit or wherever in order to keep the plane from going where the people who wanted to bring it to Washington, they were obviously prevented from reaching their target. Air travel throughout the United States, domestic air travel, has been shut down today since these terrible accident incidents in New York City and here in Washington. In fact, there's no air travel until at least noon tomorrow on order of the Federal Aviation Administration. But right now we want to go to one of the airports in the Washington area, that is Dulles International. This is the site of where the American Airlines flight 77 that left this morning on its way to Los Angeles and ended up plowing into the Pentagon a very short time later. CNN's Eileen O'Connor is there at Dulles. Eileen?
Well, there has been some activity here, Judy. The FBI has arrived, and they have been seen going in and out of the building. They brought some equipment in to check through the building. We do know from airport personnel and the airport authority that both National and Dulles are shut down till 11 o'clock at least tomorrow morning, but also that they immediately implemented an emergency drill procedure. And that means that they called in all of their police, and they have their own police force and their own fire personnel, and they also have all of their operational staff here at the airport. They are securing the airport. You can see actually behind me, they have actually erected barricades, concrete barricades, with some of these forklifts. have been operating over the last hour, erecting these barricades. Also, there's barricades right now in the entrances to the airport to prevent anyone from coming back here. As you also said, United and American Airlines, obviously they are the ones that lost flights. They have been issuing statements saying that they are trying to help the families, both of these airlines issuing statements. They've also said that they have accounted for all of their other flights and that they are all safely on the ground. They want to make sure people know that. And they also say that they will do everything they can to make sure that their customers, the people who were traveling, are comfortable until they can fly on to their destinations. Judy?
And Eileen, any other people around there? I mean, we see you, obviously, and we see a few other people, but presumably not much other activity there at all.
No, and they have actually tried to stage some of the, obviously there are relatives, concerned relatives from the American flight that took off from this morning, and we are being told by airport authorities that they are trying to send those relatives over to a nearby hotel and to try to give them information. Both airlines have issued phone numbers for for people to find out about loved ones. One of those airlines is United. Their number is 800-932-8555. But they are saying that people should stay away from the airports. These airports are shut. Again, they're under emergency procedures. And also, you know, Judy, for here, an investigation is taking place. The FBI is already here. They've had sniffer dogs around the airport. They want to see how the security was breached. We are also told that the tarmac has been secure, that the airplanes that are currently on the ground were very quickly secured after it was decided to shut these airports down. Judy?
Eileen, just reiterating, there were 8 cities in the United States involved with these aircraft that plowed into the Trade Center building complex, into the Pentagon, and then into the ground in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, south of Pittsburgh. 2 planes took off from Boston, 1 from Newark, 1 from Dulles near Washington, where you are. 3 of those flights were headed for Los Angeles, 1 for San Francisco. Of course, none of those flights reached their intended destination. Now back to Aaron in New York.
Judy, thank you. It is, I know for many of you around the country, you are making your way home. You have not necessarily been with us all day long. Life has gone on, I suppose, with TVs on in most offices, but life has gone on. I just wonder if we can take a shot of the building behind me, the World Trade Center building, and just take a moment to try and absorb, not with the facts, not with the pieces of information, but just look at that scene and think about what happened today. There were 50,000 or so people who came to work on a beautiful late summer morning here in New York, in those 2 towers that are now gone. These are people with families, with children, people who had offices and have them no more, people whose lives are forever changed. And it happened in a space of very few minutes. 8:48 this morning it began. A few minutes later, at about 9:08, a second plane zoomed towards the unhit tower, the second tower. You see it in the lower part of your screen, and it just slices that tower in half. If we can re-rack it and show it again so you'll know where to look, you'll see the plane first in the lower left side of the screen coming at it, and there it goes. And what must it have been like in those buildings and on these hijacked airliners? We heard earlier that Barbara Olson, a frequent commentator here, was on the flight that was going to Washington, or had been hijacked to Washington. She called her husband and said that the hijacking was underway. She said that from what she could tell, the hijackers, and she didn't indicate how many, except there was more than one, were armed with just knives and cardboard cutters, that they had herded all the people on board this flight to the back of the plane, including the pilot, and she asked her husband, the Solicitor General, Ted Olson, who many of you will recall argued the post-election case before the Supreme Court, said to her husband, "What do I do?" And shortly after that, that plane with Ms. Olson and many more crashed at the Pentagon. General Wesley Clark joins us from Little Rock. General Clark has been with us a number of times today. General, I wonder if you will weigh in for a second on this debate or this discussion that has been going on for most of the afternoon here, which is, have we misapplied in some ways intelligence resources, that we have become so infatuated with what we can do with machines and high tech that we have inappropriately, I guess, spent less money, less time, less effort on the down and dirty human intelligence?
Well, that's certainly a question that everyone is going to be asking, and it will be asked in official channels, and it will be asked to those who are best in a position to give that answer. My experience with it has been that I've heard this charge now for some 25 years in the intelligence business, and we have put emphasis into not only technical intelligence but human intelligence. But you know, it's very hard to get the kind of specific intelligence that would prevent something like this. Many of these people are members of a family. They come from a specific village, perhaps. Their background is known and vetted. They're carefully controlled. Their movements and communications are monitored. And it's difficult, no doubt, for any intelligence organization, no matter how well it's resourced and how courageous its members, to penetrate an organization like that and give us information. Intelligence is always characterized by a failure to know what you don't know. And I'm sure that we'll make improvements. There are always more things that could be done in the aftermath of something like this. But if there's one single message that comes through to me here, and I think will come through to many others, it's that it's not enough simply to put up the best defenses against terrorism, but that more active measures are no doubt called for, particularly in this case.
When you say more active measures, you're talking about proactive?
That's right. Preemptive measures. We've known a number of these groups have, for a long time, said they declared war on the United States. And we have dealt with them, we've fenced with them, we've cooperated with other governments against them, we've chased individuals, we've hauled some into court. But I think that not only do we have to ask ourselves, could we have learned more in this specific case, we have to also ask ourselves, could we have done more if we've been willing to take greater risks, if we've been willing to take more extraordinary measures earlier, to take some of these groups and these individuals at their word that they had declared war on us and they deserved to be taken seriously and they merited some preemptive action.
And just perhaps stating the obvious, sir, when you talk about preemptive action, first of all, you got to be able to find the people you're taking the action against. Do we know where the right people are so that if the country is going after these people, they get the right people?
Well, I think that's always the problem. And there will always be a certain degree of uncertainty, and there'll be a certain degree of concern about this. The best way to handle any international terrorist organization is to arrest its leaders, present the evidence, and have them tried in a court of law. And that certainly is the way anyone would prefer to deal with this. But perhaps in some cases, it's not possible to do that, or it's not possible to do that quick enough. We'll have to ask those questions in the aftermath. It's not simply about intelligence, it's also about acting on intelligence.
I mean, ultimately, sir, this is not simply a military or an intelligence question. This is a core political question. It really has to do with how we see ourselves in a country, whether we are willing to take the risks that some innocents may perish because of what we as a country do, and that's a political question for the country to deal with.
It's a profound political question, and I think it's also a question for the international community, because an event like this is a real cry for alarm and recognition in the international community. A tragedy like this can happen here, it can happen anywhere. And international terrorism is too dangerous and too ambiguous and too difficult for any single nation to handle by itself. We need strong, reliable support from friends and allies around the world, and I'm sure we'll be asking for it. And clearly one of the things that ought to come from this is not only better U.S. intelligence, it's better sharing of information, pooling of information with our partners in all corners of the globe.
General Clark, thanks again for joining us, as you have a number of other times today, and I suspect you will again before the day is out. General Wesley Clark in Little Rock, Arkansas today. Thank you, sir. Judy?
Aaron, we want to tell our viewers, first of all, that we have just been handed a report from CNN reporter Patty Davis that all international flights have now arrived or will be arriving shortly. Those are flights coming into the United States or Canada. Those are flights that presumably had left their destination hours and hours ago, but they have arrived safely, or they are expected to shortly. We'll continue to bring you updates on air travel as we get them. And I've just been told that President Bush will address the nation tonight at 9 o'clock Eastern Time. Now, we had been told a little bit earlier the President would be speaking to the American people. We now have confirmed the time is 9 o'clock Eastern, and you can count on the fact, of course, CNN will carry that address. CNN correspondent Jean Meserve has spent the last several hours at the Federal Emergency Management Agency. These are the people who, Jean, are dealing all the time with disasters. Bring us up to date on what's going on there now.
Judy, the National Interagency Emergency Operations Center is up and running here, as it is often at times of disaster. We went up and looked at that a couple of hours ago. There are about 40 people up there. They represent 28 different government agencies and offices, also the Red Cross and the Salvation Army. What they do is try and figure out what local and state officials need to help them deal with a disaster situation, and they have already made some moves today. They have dispatched urban search and rescue task forces. 4 of them have been sent to the Pentagon. 4 are en route to New York City. Another 4 have been activated, 3 of those in California, 1 in Missouri. Last time I was able to speak to an official here, they were trying to figure out how to get them to New York City. Apparently it was going to take a military airlift because, of course, there is no commercial air traffic at this time. Each of those task force consists of 62 people and about 60,000 pounds of equipment. That's medical gear, tools, dogs, food. The idea is they are supposed to be able to be self-sufficient for 72 hours at a stretch. They provide a wide array of services. They will do search and rescue. They can shut off utilities. They can check the structural integrity of buildings. There are a total of 28 of these task forces around the country. We've been told that the other 16 most of them have been put on alert status, but they have not yet been activated and given orders to move. In addition, disaster mortuary affairs teams, 4 of them have been sent to New York City, 3 of them to the Pentagon. 30 people on each of these teams. What they do is help take care of the bodies after they have been extricated from the wreckage. Also, there are disaster medical assistance teams, 4 of them to New York, 3 to the Pentagon, 35 people on each of those teams. Those would be doctors, nurses, and paramedics to help, of course, with the medical situation. I should mention that the director of this agency, Joe Alba, was not in Washington when these events took place. He was out in Montana at a conference of the National Emergency Managers Conference. This is all the state emergency directors from around the country. He, of course, immediately made moves to get back to Washington. We believe he is now on his way here. Judy, back to you.
All right, Jean Meserve telling us about the teams of experienced people who are being deployed from FEMA. That's the nickname for the Federal Emergency Management Agency, headquartered here in Washington. But right now, teams of people being sent out, deployed to the sites of these horrific disasters. The New York Twin Towers, World Trade Center. You're still looking at those live pictures on the right part of your screen here in Washington, to the Pentagon, the site of another airplane crash. Joining us now from Charlottesville, Virginia, former Secretary of State Lawrence Eagleburger. He was Secretary in the administration of the first President George Bush. I want to ask you, Secretary Eagleburger, so many people, we've been talking to a lot of people today, but it seems to me that many Americans now are going to want to strike back, to get back as soon as we can and as hard as we can at whoever was behind this. How realistic is that?
Oh boy, that's a very tough question. Well, it won't be quick, I think. It'll take us some time to organize ourselves, try to figure out who was responsible for this. Although I might say, by the way, that's less of a concern to me than it will be to a number of others. We know who most of the terrorists are. We may not know which ones did this, although they have to have been very, very well organized and very well financed. But getting back at it almost is the wrong way to, I think, to put this. So that's what a lot of people will want. What I think we need now to understand is this really is a war with terrorism, and we need to be prepared to act as if we are at war, and that does not necessarily mean that you have to strike back only at those that you know were the perpetrators of this thing.
Well, what does it mean?
We know a lot of terrorists around the world, and we know a lot of governments that have financed and supported terrorism. And you start with Osama bin Laden, I suppose, and you start with the Afghans.
Well, what can you do, Mr. Secretary?
Well, what you do, and this is what you do, is you strike at them militarily. I mean, I know this is going to sound awful, but my point is there's only one way to begin to deal with people like this, and that is you have to kill some of them, even if they are not immediately, directly involved in this thing. We do know that the Taliban and the government of Afghanistan has mothered Osama bin Laden for years. They need to be hit. Either they need to be hit, or they need to understand very quickly that they have got to stop supporting terrorism, and then make it evident that they're stopping the terrorism.
So you're not talking about a long, drawn-out investigation, as we had with Pan Am 103 over Lockerbie,
I hope not.
A long, drawn-out effort to extradite possible suspects.
I hope not. I hope not, because if that's the case, well, you saw what happened with Pan Am 103. I mean, by the time it was all done, first of all, many people had lost all interest in the subject. This is an act of war. When they compare this to Pearl Harbor, I don't think they're wrong in the sense that it's a surprise attack. And I suspect, if we are wise about this, Pearl Harbor brought the American people together and made us recognize we had something we had to deal with. Perhaps this will do the same thing for all of us.
All right, former Secretary of State Lawrence Eagleburger.
Can I make one more point?
Yes, Mr. Secretary, you may.
We need to find out what happened that these planes could be hijacked. That, to me, is the most critical question of all. How was it possible to hijack these aircraft? I thought we had dealt with that problem before. If, in fact, if they had not been hijacked, none of this would have happened.
Well, we did hear just from a fragment of information, Mr. Secretary, reportedly from Barbara Olson, the conservative commentator, the wife of the United States Solicitor General, told her husband and others in a phone call these were men who had hijacked. This was the American Airlines flight that left Dulles, that these men, as far as she could tell, only had knives and paper or cardboard cutters on them as weapons. We want to thank Secretary Lawrence Eagleburger for joining us. Joey Chen in Atlanta.
Judy, thanks very much. For our viewers who have just been trying to catch up on all the events that have occurred today, I want to bring you first up to date with the latest information on a full detailed tick-tock of what has happened in the course of this day. Look at the latest from Ben Wiedemann.
8:45 a.m. in New York. Smoke billows from the World Trade Center after a large passenger plane slammed into the North Tower. Initial reports suggested it was an accident. 9:03, another airliner hits the Trade Center's South Tower, an explosion bursting from the building's upper floors.
2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center.
President Bush calls the crashes an apparent terrorist attack. 9:45, another hit. A commercial plane crashes into the Pentagon. 9:51. Taking no chances, the Federal Aviation Administration grounds all takeoffs and landings and reroutes incoming international flights to Canada. and the Pentagon soon upgrades its terrorism alert status to Delta, the highest possible level. 10 a.m. Back in New York, the Trade Center's South Tower crumbles to the ground. 10:29, the North Tower collapses. These buildings were once the tallest in the world. Lower Manhattan, home to the city's financial district, is shrouded in smoke, dust, and ash. 10:10 a.m., a half hour earlier, United Flight 93, bound from Newark, New Jersey to San Francisco, crashes into western Pennsylvania. Police there say initial reports suggest there were no survivors. In Washington, the Departments of Justice, State, Treasury, and Defense were among those ordered evacuated, as were the Capitol and the White House. In New York, major businesses and stock exchanges were evacuated. All tunnels and bridges into and out of the city were shut down. The United Nations was evacuated as a precaution. Hundreds, perhaps thousands, of people are feared hurt or killed in what is clearly the worst ever terrorist attack on the United States. Ben Wiedemann, CNN.
More perspective now. We turn to Brian Jenkins, who is a counterterrorism expert. He joins us from Los Angeles this afternoon. Sir, I wonder if you could talk to us a little bit. I mean, it cannot escape our attention that the targets struck were in the very seats of U.S. wealth, of U.S. military power, and indeed very symbolic structures. I wonder if you can give us some indication about what the terrorists, what symbol, what signal they're trying to send here.
I think they are trying to send just that signal, and that is their ability to strike at the heart of American power. The Pentagon being the heart of American military power, the World Trade Center being in Lower Manhattan, the heart of the nation's economic power. Both of these structures, the Pentagon and the World Trade Center, in addition, being great symbols of these cities, great symbols of America. Their ability to strike those is intended to create alarm and panic throughout the United States.
And in fact, there have been closings of businesses, of schools, of all sorts of things all over the country in the course of this day because of these assaults. I'm wondering if you can give us any of your perspective. Obviously, you don't have a crystal ball to look at these things, but should we regard this as being done at this point? It has been silent for much of the rest of the day since this morning.
One has to be very, very careful in looking at a multiple coordinated attack like this to say exactly when it's over. I mean, it was 31 years ago, almost to the day, that in a single day, 3 airliners were hijacked. One of the hijackings failed, but the other 2 airliners, plus an airliner that was hijacked on the following day, were flown to Desert Airfield in Jordan, where the hijackers, members of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, held the hostages for a number of days.
All right, Ms. Jenkins, I'm sorry to have to interrupt you here. We do have some late developments. As you see at the bottom of your screen, there are reports from CNN's Nick Roberts.